Hey, everybody. Oh, damn it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Game Club Podcast. I'm your host, She Says from Boundary Break, and I'm here with the usual cast of characters. We got a+start from Son of a Glitch.
Oh, hi, everybody. Hi.
And we also have Beta64 from
Beta64. That's me. Hi.
Yay.
That's me.
And this week, we're talking about The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch. So, let's
ready?
have at it.
Are you ready, guys? I just want to let the audience know. Whoa! I didn't know that. If you put magic powder on the green things, they grow eyes.
Yeah.
They also talk to you, yeah.
Sorry, we're watching a walkthrough while we're doing this podcast to get ourselves in the mood.
You're letting the secrets out.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, behind-the-scenes featurette.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
She says hates
She
the game.
says.
Goodbye.
Yeah, that's it.
No,
That's
I'm kidding.
the whole build-up was for that. She said hates the game. I like the game. Andy, what is your thoughts, Andy? I actually don't know.
Let's go through it. Let's start at the beginning. It was a stormy day or night, depending on your position. And Link doth on a raft in the middle of thy ocean. And
Actually, he had a full-size boat.
oh, did he? Yeah, he did. Huh.
Wow. For a guy who
It's funny how I remember
you
that.
sure know a lot.
Yeah. Why did I think he was on a raft? Was he in a raft?
Because, well, I mean, the lightning breaks the boat, which puts him
Yeah.
on a raft, basically.
But was he?
Yeah.
Okay, so he is definitely on a boat
spoilers,
in the.
by the way.
Yeah. Oh,
Let's just say
right at the
spoilers
beginning
right now
of the
so
game.
that I...
Yeah,
so I
the
can
raft
say
is
this
a
real
major spoiler.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
Sorry.
Anyways.
So yeah, let's start at the beginning. So obviously this is a remake, and how do you guys feel about remakes, really?
I usually love remakes.
Mm-hmm.
Usually.
It's just such. I can feel just the hatred coming out of your voice. I usually like remakes. However,
No, but I think he's
usually
he's being genuine because Resident Evil 2 this year, he absolutely
that was
loved
a
that.
really good remake.
Yeah, that's actually
did?
my favorite game of the year so far, yeah.
So there you go. So
Dang,
he's
I'm
not
sorry.
being-
I'll
he's not
back
being,
up. I'll back up.
It's okay, man. It's okay.
It's okay. I'm sorry. I hurt your. Hug it out. Hug it out.
Yeah. There it
There we
is.
go. That's
Somebody filled out their bingo card.
That's right. That is on there.
nice.
Okay, I want to say one thing about remakes. Okay, it's I have like this iffy feeling with them, only for the fact of like I like playing games on the original hardware. That's my thing that I like to. If I'm gonna play a game, I want to like Banjo-Kazooie. I don't want to play it on the Xbox. I want to play it on the N64. However, there's a lot of these kind of like this game in particular that I never played on the Game Boy. I had no desire to play it. Like I didn't even, it wasn't even on my radar. And then Nintendo's like, "Oh, we're making Link's Awakening." And I'm like, "You know what? I'm just going to give it a try." So, just for everyone to know, this is my first time ever playing the game. I didn't play the original, and I want to go out on a limb just right now and say this might potentially be one of my favorite Zelda games of all time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It is one of the best. Andy?
Yeah, well, I did play the original, but not as old, like, not when it was first out. I did it for a glitch episode, like, really just, oh, that's a game, oh, let's find some glitches in that one.
Yeah.
But I really, but from what I remember of the game, and this was a couple of years ago now, I really enjoyed it. It is very simple, but obviously because of the hardware, it would be. But I definitely remember enjoying it. There was never a point where I was like, not this game. You know what I mean? I liked it.
Do you feel that about any Zelda game?
Maybe kind of. Any game, any Zelda game that you take forever to actually start. Like, every time I go back to Ocarina, I'm kind of like, the intro's a little bogged down. I just want to get to the good stuff,
Yeah.
But the thing about this, whether you're talking about the remake or the original, is it gets right into it. There's no hanging around.
yeah.
There's no, like, it doesn't throw story at you so much, which means you can get straight to the gameplay. And that I love about both versions, I guess.
I can agree with that. There's a lot of exploration in this game, but despite the fact that like you're so closed off at the beginning, it has a really good world building where it's like every time you get a new item, it makes it a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And for a Game Boy game, it's a huge world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Huge. I'm gonna say a lot of things of like this was impressive on the hardware. It might not be impressive nowadays in terms of world size, but going back to what it originally was, this is a very technically impressive game.
Oh,
So-
on the original Game Boy, totally. It like you just said, there's a nice large world, and it's really expertly crafted too. Like, it has that Metroid-esque feel to it, where a lot of the items unlock different parts of the world. And then also, if you played the original game, those enemy sprites, like especially the boss sprites, man, they were gorgeous for a Game Boy game.
Yeah,
like they were
agreed.
really detailed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You bring up the fact that you felt the world was large. Now, you didn't play the original, so you're coming at this from, this version, the world is large. So that's an interesting question right there. Being a remake, and it's like, it's tile for tile of the original. Do you feel that it's a large world? How am I trying to phrase this? Do you feel like being a remake almost like tile for tile, and that being a big game on the Game Boy, but comparatively with other Zelda games not as big, do you feel like they kind of what's the best way to
Are you asking like, does it feel like a Game Boy game in terms of scope?
Yeah, that's yeah. I was like around
There
the
you
bush
go.
and then around the house and everywhere.
Do you
with that.
feel that like this?
I was trying to phrase it in a way like, do you feel like you're being is it worth the money for the size of the world? I guess is a good way to look at it.
We're going right to the money.
Not necessarily, just oh, wow.
What are you asking, Andy?
Do you feel this world was big for a Switch game?
I know what you're trying to say.
I
It's
know.
not- okay, yeah, just to rephrase it real quick for you, as someone who's never played the original Game Boy game and your experience was for the first time on the Nintendo Switch, did it feel like a $60 experience to you?
No,
Thank you,
it
my
felt
translator.
like a 50. It felt like, okay, I guess this is kind of, I don't know if it's for all regions, but I picked this game up for $50
Okay.
because
Nice.
at Walmart they gave you $10 off when the game released.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, Walmart.
Yeah.
And I felt like for $50, this game was, I could live with it. I could live with it for $50. I really felt it was more of a $40 game from just the fact that it's been, like a week since I've had it. It's like, it's you can beat this game in less than a week.
Yeah.
I
You
did
were
it over
busy
the
this week,
weekend.
too.
And I was really busy.
Yeah, the weekend it came out, I did nothing but play it, and it was kind of over. I don't know how many hours it was, but I can't imagine it was more than 8. So yeah.
And
Yeah,
like,
if you're
Wind
really
Waker HD
stopping
was
to
50.
smell, yeah, they lowered the price on the Wind Waker, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I know that there was more that went into this game than the Wind Waker.
Yeah.
But there's things to be said against the case of this game as well. I mean, when you consider the fact that like the Insane trilogy was also ground up, Spyro Reignited was ground up, Medieval is going to be coming out at $40, I think, or $50, and that's also from the ground up. And Shadow of the Colossus HD, that game also was less expensive than the typical retail price. So,
Yeah.
it's so even though it's not like Wind Waker where it's just ported assets and changed the lighting engine and stuff like that, there's still like, lots of examples out there in the industry where these sort of games are valued less. And you also consider the fact too that it's a Game Boy game too, I mean, I guess it's like even you who's experienced it for the first time, I guess couldn't escape the feeling that it definitely was like based off of an old Game Boy game from 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, it still feels very, very polished. Like if I had the choice to like play the Game Boy game or play this game, I would play this game for sure.
Okay, so here we go.
Here
Are you guys ready?
Oh man.
Grab in, boys.
I'm getting the seatbelt on.
Once you're in the ride, you can't get off. I'm just saying. I apologize to every person who enjoyed this game. As always, if you enjoyed something, it doesn't mean that we're enemies. It's just that we have different opinions. That's all. So, but the way I feel about it is, it doesn't do enough to separate itself from the original Game Boy game, and also I was thinking about it too. At the end of the day, I was like, you know what, this was kind of cool. I now realize that the developers deliberately looked at it and tried to translate it verbatim rather than look at what the original developers obviously intended.
Yeah.
I don't think that the original developers intended at all for the cutscenes in their video game to deliberately have a different art style from the in-game assets. I think that it was a limitation at the time, and you can tell that when they made the game on the original Game Boy, they were pushing the graphics of that hardware as much as they could, not regress it as much as they could, you know, for the sake of art style. Now you come to this remake, and like I said, at first I kind of resented it because I was like, how could they possibly be this blind to the original vision of the developers way back 20 years ago? But then over time, especially when you get to the end of the game and you hear that credits theme, you realize it's like, oh, they were deliberately going for a certain art style. They don't think that this is what the original game was going for, but they kind of took it in that direction as a creative decision. And with that in mind, I kind of appreciate the game a lot more. But then I also think to myself, like, if I was to recommend the game to anybody, which version would I recommend? Would I recommend this version over the original Game Boy Color version? And I'll say no, because to someone like you, Beta, who's going to play this remake, you will now think that it's canon that the characters are supposed to look like toys when you're on that island, and that it's like, you know, that's what the original developers intended, when I can tell you with every, you know, with full confidence that it's not what the original developers intended. So it's like, I would say it's better to play the Game Boy Color version and once again regress to just using your imagination for what the characters are supposed to look like, rather than this game explicitly tell you, yes, these characters are supposed to look like toys, which I completely disagree with. I still think that there's a much better remake out there in the ether that could possibly be made for this game.
That was a lot of words.
That was a lot of words.
Did you get everything out? Is
I
there
think
more?
so.
Okay.
No.
I want to make sure you can get it all out.
No, that's my main point. That's the hardest point that I have to make, I suppose. There's lots of other things too. You mentioned that it's really polished, and I'd say that it's a completely playable game, but there's definitely like a lack of polish for something as simplistic as this game. You know, you have something like Breath of the Wild that really pushes the hardware as far as it can go, and it performs better than this game does. You know, there's so many things that are just like weird, and like it's like, how can this possibly be a problem on a game that's so simplistic? Like the slowdowns, the frame rate issues. Again, nothing that would ever tell you like this game is trash and unplayable. Certainly not. But at the same time, I think to myself, like, this game is so simple by design, and yet somehow there's still some issues with it, you know, on a technical basis.
I'll say on that note that it's probably the fact of the lighting and the textures and all the kind of like shaders they have on everything is very complex. Very, very complex. And the fact that the whole world is completely, like, there's no loading screen for the entirety of the main world. And there's not, it's like, I look at it and my first thought is, why didn't they cap it at 30 frames per second? That was my first thought, because it dips pretty heavily, like, when moving into a new area. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, well, if it went like 50 frames per second, why not just cap it at 30, and then, you know, then you wouldn't have any dips at all. But
I think a better solve for, like, are they drawing the entire map at the same time? I mean, from what you're saying, that kind of, I mean, that would be the stupidest thing to do ever, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But in that case, you know, we have much bigger games than this. One that comes to mind that uses a really great use of, like, draw distance and what's actually on the screen is like something like Horizon Zero Dawn. That game only renders what's in your field of view. Now, I can imagine a game like this, the field of view is very limited. So how are we having slowdown this egregious on a 2019 Nintendo AAA game? It doesn't make any sense, really.
I wonder if they could do what, like, they did with Breath of the Wild, where they, like, overclocked it later with an update. I actually
Yeah.
noticed there was an update to the game. Did that fix it? For all I know.
I don't know.
I'm gonna check
Yeah.
while you talk, Cheese.
I didn't know that. I didn't know there was an update. I hope that's something they fix because visually and in terms of performance, that was one of the things. I mean, it happens the minute you leave the house. Like the second you leave the house after the first couple of dialogue boxes, you're hit with that slowdown. It's like, oh, and it's a sour taste that early on. You wouldn't mind if it was like many games have these very small segments. You know, it's funny you mentioned Breath of the Wild because that had the same kind of thing. Just some areas, some scenes, you know, have slowdown. But this is kind of all over the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, not to hyperbolize, it's not that bad. It's just that it's weird and distracting, especially when you consider the fact that it's such a small scale game, you know. And it's not. That's the thing, though. It's like there's so many ways that you could forgive something like that, but because of everything that comes together, you're kind of like, how can this possibly be a thing? It's just the fact that, like, one, it's a small scale game, so it's like, okay, you know, whatever, it should run well, but then it doesn't, and then you're like, well, okay, but it's a small scale game anyway, but then you're like, but I'm paying $60 for it, so it's like, how could you know, and I can only play it on a main console, like a home console. That's the craziest part, is that we're talking about a game that isn't even on the same hardware as A Link Between Worlds, which ran great.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was locked at 30 frames per second, but still, like, that was, when you say a polished experience, that game was a polished experience. I don't recall any weird graphical issues with that game throughout the entire experience. But with Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch, you know, like I said, the most apparent thing is the frame rate issues, but I noticed all over the place too, like grass and enemies just popping in.
Yeah.
Like when you leave Crazy Tracy's house, I think is what her name is.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
The second you leave that house, you can, for the first few frames, you can see grass popping in around as you're leaving the house, and it's like, why is this?
There's also
thing?
some lighting issues too that I've noticed, especially when like
Telltale
throwing
Heights
objects.
has a pretty like obvious. You move from one set of tiles to another, and the lighting completely changes. Like the shadows are there, and then they're not there. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, how did they miss that?
Yeah,
Two
and then
things.
also, in the second dungeon too, the entrance to the dungeon, it's weird. If you travel south and you look at the top of the screen, you can see like a tile right underneath the door frame just disappear if you like walk to a certain point. And it's consistent. Yeah, you can like check that out for yourself. I have footage of it too. Maybe I'll throw it up on the screen here.
Yeah, send it to us.
Okay.
Three things, I guess. Number one, there was no update. It was an update for the Switch system.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is
I
crazy.
got
that happened. It was like less than 30 days that they put out another update. I'm like, wow, it's getting out of control.
That two, okay, I guess I should say all of these like glitches and stuff definitely does not hamper the game's experience. Like they're just like graphical things and like slow down with the frame rate for like maybe a second, half a second, something like that when moving into a new area. It's not.
Yeah.
I don't want people to take it out of context and be like, "This game sucks. It's glitchy and it's horrible." It's like, no, it's just some graphical weirdness.
Couldn't be further from the
Right.
truth. I think it's just the thing of like when it is at 60 frames, it's beautiful. It plays like a dream, and then it just drops, and then you realize, oh, I know why they were targeting 60 because a lot of games just look and feel better at 60 frames.
Yeah, for sure.
I just don't understand in this day and age why they couldn't have it. You know, it's such a simple game. Like we keep stressing, it's a simple game. It looks simple, but yeah, I think I agree. It's probably the lighting.
The
I don't know.
lighting, the shaders, just
all
the
that jazz.
scope of the world too.
I hope they
Now,
fix it.
she
I
said-
really do.
Yeah, they should. They should. There's no reason why they can't release an update later that fixes it. They can do it.
Yeah.
My whole thing is like,
hope.
again, these are things that I wouldn't care if it was a very ambitious game like Breath of the Wild. It's like at that point, it's like you're doing so much, you're doing so many things that are new, and you're really pushing what is capable. And as a result, things start to fall apart around you because it's so complicated. And it's like when you look at this game, it's like this is less forgivable because of two reasons. One is that it's simple, like we've always been saying up to this point, and like the other point is that you had the framework of the original game, so much of the planning phases of this project was done for you. It's like if you decided like I'm just going to do like a 1-for-1 remake and just translate the assets from Game Boy to 3D, so much of the planning is already done, and like at that point polish should be like your top priority.
Yeah.
It should set itself apart from the original game as being superior in every way, and one of those things has to be performance. So that's the crazy thing for me, and that's why I think we're so like this conversation is so relevant, because we have the original game to fall back on and compare itself to. And so with that in mind, it's like all of a sudden these finer details, the things that a lot of people probably listening right now would consider nitpicking, becomes a relevant conversation, because it's, again, you have the original game to fall back on if anything is wrong with this version, which there's things wrong with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, she said, I wanted you to, I put up these images, and I'll have them on screen, of the like pictures sections of the game where they like take pictures of you. Okay.
Yeah.
If the game had this art style, would you be happy? Because this isn't done from a technical limitation. Because this is the same kind of like, what pixel? Pixel density.
I personally, I'd be okay with it, but like I wouldn't prefer it. I personally would prefer a like a 3D remake with using the art assets from the intro and outro.
So you want an anime game?
No, 'cause
That's an anime, bro. That's an anime game.
Uh-oh. Here it
no,
comes.
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about the remakes. Oh my god! All right, hands on the desk.
Yes, sir.
You opened up that can of worms. So here we go, man. This is something that bugs me.
Here we go, man.
Bugs me no matter what. Like I appreciate the game more than I did when I first started it, but I still will not forgive the game for this, and that is the fact that they clearly tried to do like 1-for-1 translation of the art style for the in-game, right? Mm-hmm. But then for some reason they took this homogenized version of Link and replaced the original 90s version of Link for the intro and ending of the game. Not happy about that, because it's like Ocarina of Time Link looks like Ocarina of Time Link. Twilight Princess Link looks like Twilight Princess Link. And Wind Waker Link looks like Wind Waker Link. If we had a remake of Wind Waker and he looked like Twilight Princess Link, nobody would be okay with that.
No, you're right.
And I'm
you're
a
right.
90s fan Link, so like the fact that they replaced him completely with this like, a Link Between Worlds version of Link, I'm not happy about that. And so got that rant out of the way. What I was trying to say was I would have liked a 3D remake that used the original art assets from the 90s. That would have been cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're doing. Like, because I'm looking at pictures right now, because I didn't know that the intro wasn't 1-to-1.
Yeah, look at the green one in the middle
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Click on that.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my thing. That is still technically an anime art style. It's just
Well, it was animation made in
early
Japan.
90s anime art style. It's just kind of it's definitely still that way. But I can understand what you're saying. You must be a huge fan of this game.
I am. It's one of my favorites.
Because
Yeah.
you've got like the whole thing of like the art style's not the same. This isn't the creator's wishes, and I get that in the fact of games that I particularly really really like. I'm like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. This is the way this happens and that happens and this happens in remakes and stuff like that. So I can understand that. From my perspective of not having played the original game, I prefer this art style of like the little tiny toy Link. And the reason is because this game is so like doesn't take itself seriously kind of game that if you had 90s anime Link running around, it wouldn't feel as in place, I guess, as this art style does. Cause like all the things that it says of like freaking you got the book that's on top of the bookshelf and it goes like, oh, you're not supposed to see that yet. And you
Yeah.
got the whole the guy from Sim City being catfished by a bunny. like this game is hilarious, and I feel like the toy art style really plays with it, especially with all the Mario characters and everything.
Yeah.
The art styles match in that sense.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think we're both
I'll say
right.
this. Well, I was gonna say, I think that it still would have worked with the art style that the original game developers showcased in the intro and ending. I think it still would have worked. And also, like, here's probably the most controversial thing that I'll say.
Oh boy.
Number one most controversial thing that I'll say. I think that Nintendo fans tend to get complacent with some of the decisions that they make. So, like, a game like this, everyone's on board and ready to be okay with it, but I still think that we deserve better. Like, they have the resources and assets to make something that's far superior to what we got here. And I think just because it's what we got, so many Nintendo fans are just willing to accept it and also defend it. But to me, I think that we could have possibly had a much better game than this as far as a Link's Awakening remake goes. And I mean, again, I just wanted to politely disagree that I think that the anime, I'll go ahead and say anime.
Go ahead. Yeah, say it.
Just say it.
That
It's
anime,
okay.
that anime art style would have probably fit just fine. It just would have been different, you know. Of course, it's going to be different because we got Toy Box Link instead.
Okay.
But like, I think it would have worked.
Yeah. Two things. One, that is the most dangerous thing you've ever said.
I know.
Because like you know what happens when people like say I deserve better on this game and I want better and we deserve better. You get freaking Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Oh jeez,
okay.
yeah.
That's what you're gonna get. It's a super. I can understand where you're like okay. First off, the director. I got to figure out if the director is the same between the original Link's Awakening and the remake.
It's not.
It's not.
I can't imagine it would be the
Cool.
same.
But the thing is like, I feel like, it's okay. She said it's okay that you don't like the art style. It's okay that it's not like a super, like what you wanted in the game. And I totally understand that, and I think your points are valid. It's just like, I still liked it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I
like it. I'm okay with both.
Like again, I guess I was kind of retreading old feelings. Again, at the end of the game, you know, I kind of understood the vision of the creators here and how they very deliberately took everything super literally and translated it super literally. Because when you think about it like that, where it's like they weren't stupid. They didn't think like, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. They thought to themselves like, wouldn't it be cool if we did it this way? And like did it in a convincing sort of way. Like when you think about it like that, it's fine. And again, like I liked playing this game quite a bit. And again, there's so many things that I appreciate. Like for example, despite the fact that it's rather one-to-one with trying to represent the art style of the original sprites, thankfully the sprites were already large and very detailed on the bosses to begin with. So when they got translated to 3D, it was a treat because they hardly changed, you know, and you just got to see what they looked like in a 3D environment, which is nice. So, I mean, like, there's that. And also the music. Oh, all right. Well, it's hit and miss for me, but sometimes it really nails it, you know? And sometimes, like, the new creative direction that they took with arranging the music ended up paying off, and I kind of liked it. But, you know, again, all I'm saying is that if there was a literal, like, if there was a new project made where it was like a small scale Ocarina of Time-esque remake but used the original art style of the original game, I think it would have been like so much more special than what this is.
I think
Andy, you haven't
I think
talked
a number
a
of things
lot.
are happening in regards to like the art style. I think they did really well, actually. I think they were very faithful to the material besides the design that they went with in the end. But I think what's happening here is I don't think Nintendo are marketing this game towards us, you know, late 20s, early 30s, you know, age people who were around when the game was first out. I think they're trying to tap into a newer market who are perhaps
I'm the newer
unfamiliar with
market.
what the 90s even is, you know.
Actually, that's not me.
I think they don't mind trying to get away from that, whatever that was, because it's a different time period, and I think to lean too heavily into it may date the game. I mean,
well, it's funny that you say that because there's so much that's still prevalent in the game that is like 90s jank. Like, for example, when you pick up the special abilities, they still like give you that message prompt every single time
I know
you
that
pick
annoyed
up like
me.
an
That was like, really?
You want to talk about 90s sensibilities versus modern day, like that's like one of those things that you should have changed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You only need to see that once. You get it. Or most 5 times. And then you're like, okay, I get it. Never show me this again, you know?
You know, Andy,
Right.
you really like hit the nail on the head for me, because I was actually having a conversation with my wife yesterday about just like growing. As you're growing up, we're having to deal with the fact that we are no longer the target audience
Yeah.
for a lot of things. And with all these remakes, like, how do we deal with the fact that we're no longer the target audience for the game that came out when we were the target audience? And like, you have the whole feeling of Metroid Prime Federation Force when that happened. That, like, I'm just gonna say, just kind of touch on that, just for the fact of like, it's more than obvious that the target audience was not original Metroid fans. It was for kids and people who like didn't play Metroid and wanted like a cute little thing to play. And people just were like up in arms about it, and it's like, it's because we're not the target audience anymore. And the same thing is happening with like movies. Like, we had the whole fact of like Toy Story 3 going off to college kind of thing. The people who watched the original Toy Story, by the time they got to Toy Story 3, they were still the target audience. But then we're getting to these new movies that are coming out where it's we're going back to kids again. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just dealing with the fact that all these fun cartoons and fun games that are coming out, you're not the one who they're shooting for to sell it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do a catch-all. I think like the fact that they did a remake of Link's Awakening at all shows that they're trying to, one, obviously introduce it to a new audience, like you said, but also two, grab that nostalgia that people like you and me had, talking to Andy there, when we played the game. So, you know, I think in some cases you're right. Like, I think Splatoon is one of those games where it's like it's very targeted towards a new generation of people, and like you can be an older person that can enjoy it for what it is, but at the same time, like, I think there's like an aesthetic and style that is very indicative of no, I actually think that they tried to go for a style of their own. I didn't catch too many anime tropes with Splatoon, aside from like the giant catfish and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, no, I don't know. I think that this is trying to appeal to everybody. Here's another thing that I'll say too. Just kind of like introduce this to you, Andy, since I'm assuming you played it when you were a kid.
I didn't, but I was
for the Son of a Glitch episode then?
For the Son of a Glitch episode. But if we have to make a comparison to how close games in the series are, I played Link to the Past around the same time that game was. They're like a year or two apart, whatever the time period is. But they're two very similar games, and I can imagine at the time I would have absolutely loved this game had I played it back then.
Oh yeah. And I think so. Here's my thing, right? Is I think like if I traveled 25 years in the past and I asked my young self, like, what do you think this game's gonna be like 25 years from now when they make it again? Like, they make it an all new remake of this game. What do you think it's gonna be like 25 years from now? I think like my imagination would go wild, especially if I had just played like Ocarina of Time and then I was asked that question. I'd be like, oh my goodness, I can only imagine how much better it's going to get in 25 years. Get to 2019 and this is what we have. It's like a shot for shot like remake, and it's kind of like, it's like why people get so mad at the idea of like the Psycho remake, with Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
It's like, it's shot for shot but just with different people, and it's like, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
And I feel this way about this game. Like, it doesn't do anything particularly brave. I guess like the bravest thing that it does is that it warps your perception of what the intent was behind the art style.
Yeah.
And like, again, that's the one thing I hate the most. Is like, okay, so the one thing, it's like, all right, if you're gonna go for one, I want the music to be bombastic like it was in the original game. Like the intro title screen, the what's it called? Tall Tall Heights. Like those songs very clearly are arranged on the original Game Boy to sound big and heroic, you know? But then in this remake, it's like they pull out the toy instruments, you know? And it's like, oh, geez.
You know, she says, I'm going to agree with you.
Oh,
Yes!
wow.
I think that the original Game Boy soundtrack is better than the remakes, except for Maybe Village. I really, really like Maybe Village in the Switch version. But I will say, the rest of the music is just kind of, it feels so background.
Toy box, yeah.
It's just not, it's not super out there and memorable, in my opinion. So,
Which is a shame because the
you.
soundtrack is really good. And I'll say this too. I want to say some good things about this new revised arranged soundtrack. You know, funny thing too is talking to people on Twitter and stuff, a lot of people didn't even realize that this was like new arrangements, you know, like they messed with the melody composition, and obviously like the intent, you can just tell that the intent's a little bit different in some places. I know that it's an 8-bit soundtrack, but you could still kind of get a sense of what the guys were going for when they, you know, wrote the music. So that being said, yes, The Village, they kind of took it in a different direction, and I love the direction that they took. It sounds really good. Then also some of the dungeons just came out sounding phenomenal, but it's like some of the most common themes in the game were changed drastically and for the worse. Like, yes, the main theme, the overworld theme, is like just a take on the classic Zelda overworld theme. So it's, you know, you think, how can you mess that up? But like, there are certain notes to the overworld theme in Link's Awakening that really makes it stand apart from all the other versions that are available in the series. And those notes are absent in the remake. Like there's like some high notes that kind of like get really, really like heightened. And again, it expresses like a strong heroic theme, but because of the composers, the arrangers, had a different vision for this game, it gets lost in translation, which is like, it hurts. It makes me want to go back and listen to the original theme or fan remakes of the original theme because they get it, you know? They understand what the original composers were going for.
Yeah.
Everyone enjoying She Says podcast?
I'm so sorry.
No, it's
Guys,
okay.
Just so
I've
the
been waiting
audience...
so long to talk about all this.
Just so he's waited so long. He's been dying.
Yeah,
to
he's
get
been a
this
good
off
boy.
his chest. Music-wise, I don't feel one way or the other. There's a couple of standout tracks for me, just for that really like heighten my, ooh, this is beautiful actually. The track that plays after you defeat the boss and you're about to grab the instrument, and there's kind of that like they took the original music from the Game Boy version and then added like this swell of kind of strings in the background. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
That was
There's
an
a couple of
amazing
it's I know. It is just the kind of usual stuff that they do with these kind of remakes, or maybe they don't put as much thought into it as they should. Maybe they are trying to change the intention of what it's supposed to sound like and how you're supposed to feel. I'm not sure, but I'm not one way or the other really.
See, I think we can kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can kind of just put it as this, where she says the reason you're so disappointed is because you played this game as a kid and you had an active imagination that just imagined all this world and stuff, and then it came out and it wasn't what you saw, and you're disappointed from it. And I can understand that, and you can even
sort of,
and you can go as far as to say like, oh, it's not the same as what they originally intended, kind of thing, but because of limitations and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, I can understand that. I feel like for the people who didn't play this game, like as at a very young age, or at an age where, because I don't have an imagination anymore.
Me neither, to be honest. It's going.
So it's like when I play this game, like I can't recommend it enough as being just such a fun Zelda game that's unlike any of the other Zelda games since. And it's like I can't recommend it enough. Yeah. And for you,
at the end of the day, it's still one of the best games, no matter what. Like because they followed it so closely, it's not going to be a bad game ever.
Yeah.
It can't be. It's based off of one of the best games the series has to offer. So like, I can't stand here right now and tell anybody like this game is bad. It's not. It's still at the end of the day a remake of an incredible game.
It just didn't go the way you were expecting it to go or wanted it to go.
Yeah, well, look at Nintendo has so much resources. They have incredible resources. It's been proven that they have so much money stored away, and it's largely because they're not willing to do anything that brave most of the time. And this is like an example of that, where it's like you had a winning formula, a winning game, and you had a chance to do something truly special in this modern age to translate it into what the developers would have wanted. The funniest thing is that the contrast between this game and its original is that way back 20-something years ago, the developers pushed the hardware as hard as it could go to make the most gorgeous looking Zelda game that you could possibly put out on a Game Boy. And then 25 years later, we're on the most complicated hardware that Nintendo's ever produced, and you've instead decided to regress it to the most basic looking game that you could possibly imagine on the hardware that it's for. You know, it's it's so weird, isn't it?
I gotta disagree only for the fact of I can't think of any other game that goes for a toy look and looks this good. Like you
Nintendo Land.
It doesn't look like the tree. I actually had to think about that. I was like, yeah, it did look kind of good. But it's like you look at the trees and it looks like you can eat them.
I don't want to eat
Wait a second.
And it looks...
Eat them.
I know. It looks more like... I didn't see it as like a toy look. I saw it as like a candy look. Like, it just looks so beautiful compared to like any other game I've seen try to make this art style. So it's like, I don't even think they regressed it. I don't even think that it pushes the limit. It obviously pushes the limits of the hardware.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Visibly.
It's just
Apparently.
visibly. It's just like... I know it's not the most complex thing, but... I mean, I'm sure these are like high poly models to get them to look so smooth and round, and the shaders have got to be crazy complex to make it look this good.
So the funny thing is that like most of the time I didn't even remember that it's supposed to be like a toy aesthetic. It's not until like it really like zoomed in on the character models I'm like, oh yeah, his tunic is shiny and not textured. That's weird, right? So it's like, oh yeah, I am playing like a toy version of Link. But like most of the time it just feels simplistic. It never really gets across to me that it's supposed to be like a toy world, you know? It's not until I stop and think about the fact that it's like, oh yeah, the trees are shinier than they should be, so it's like I guess that's supposed to be like a toy version of a tree, but then like the grass and everything doesn't really provoke a toy-like aesthetic. Certainly like when you cut the grass, it's not like you're cutting plastic. They still have like physics that are similar to that of regular grass, you know? So it's like that. Yeah, so it doesn't really come across very well to me. I don't know. I guess it's like, I guess when you really think about it, if you're thinking about it as a game developer, yeah, like some of the stuff that they've implemented here is impressive. But then like the end result, when I'm just looking at it and playing the game, nothing about it really seems that impressive to me. You know? And I'm not just saying that to be contrarian or arrogant. No, yeah, but it's just like literally it seems fine, but it doesn't seem like I'm not like blown away by the graphical fidelity of it.
The only thing I'm blown away from is the water. Looks incredible.
No, I was just thinking that. I see, this is the thing. I like what they've done with this game visually. I liked it when they first showed it off and they did that kind of the blurring of the edges. It's called something tilt shifting. I loved that. I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever seen that in a game. And I've come to learn now that a couple of people are like, I don't really like the blurred edges. I like to be able to see everything on the screen. And I'm like, okay, well, that's an artistic choice. That's maybe they should have had an ability to turn it on or off. But I guess that's down to the developers. Here's the thing. Here's my thoughts on that. I'm okay with. I actually kind of fall more into the lines of like I'd rather see everything. Yeah. I guess as the boundary break guy, that's kind of like gotten burned to my brain. But like I'll accept it. But here's the problem: is that graphical effect that they put into the game world doesn't really make sense when you look at it, because like the depth of the game world isn't that far stretched out. It's more top down than it is like distance wise. So to see like a big giant blur on like 1/8 of the screen at the bottom
doesn't really make sense because the objects aren't that close to your face, you know? It's mostly top down, so when you have that effect there, it just looks distracting and out of place to me because it doesn't really seem like the objects are really smacking you in the face to warrant that blur effect in the front.
Yeah.
And I suppose like having the blur effect up above kind of makes a little more sense because it does tilt downward. But yeah, that's how I felt. Again, I was able to ignore that pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's not
once I got
something
into
that's
the
so
game.
like, oh my
Yeah.
god, I can't not see it. I think it's more of a
Right.
unless we were able to see it with and without, I don't know how we would truly feel. Like
Yeah.
we don't know that it could make the game less appealing in the art style that they've gone for. I get why they've chosen to go with the blurring of the edges. Whether it was a good idea, maybe that's where all the slowdown is. Who knows?
Yeah, you never
I would
know.
laugh so hard if that was the truth. But I like it. I there's not one point in this game where I was like, I don't like the way this looks.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, once again, it's because I don't know. We don't have the same kind of passion for the game that she says it does.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it looks beautiful. I think it's amazing. I bought the amiibo as fast as I could just because I
Same.
love the art style and how cute he looks. I love the lighting. I love the effect. I love when I walk into the desert. It looks hot.
Yeah.
It looks like it's got like dust and everything, and it starts blooming out like it's super sunny. And I like when I go into the desert, it's like it's got fog that suddenly appears. I love all of it.
I like the fog. I like what they did with the forest for the most part.
Yeah.
The desert I wasn't really impressed with. There was like, I feel like they could have done more there. And like another thing too is that this is straight out of Arlo's review. Guys, check it out if you can. But he mentioned something that it rings true. It's like, yeah, this is a full-on remake, and yet they still did the same thing that they did in the original Game Boy game, where it's like you had identical skeleton bones stacked next to each other, and it's like
Yeah.
you couldn't make a different looking set of bones now that it's a 2019 version of the game. It's like the grass is still like in square units, and they did nothing to round out the edges of the grass. It's like, again, that's something that could have easily been adjusted slightly to make the game world feel a little more organic. There was a limitation at the time for the Game Boy, but now that's not something that's holding the game back anymore. Like, that should have been something that was worked out to make the game look a little more.
It was definitely done on purpose.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But like at the same time, like there's a certain point where it's like you should have done some graphical tweaks to make it more immersive and less one-to-one.
So
I liked it.
I'm feeling that your overall opinion is leaning too
It's too
hard
safe.
into the source material is a detriment to it.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like if I wanted to play a one-for-one version of the game,
You
I
just play the original.
You just play the original, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Which I will say at the end of the day, I recommend that people just buy the DX version on 3DS for $5. It's like there's not enough in this remake to warrant an extra $55 unless you just happen to have that money lying around and you're like, I want to play another version of Link's Awakening. Buy this $60 version, sure. But like if you just want to play the game at all, the quality of life improvements that this game introduces are not that amazing. That makes it that much $55 better than the original DX version.
Yeah.
Some things that I will say that I particularly like that are different than the original, which I only know because my wife played the original game and loved it. The things I like, the crane game, I love to death.
The fact that it's real physics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it so much. I would pay Nintendo. I know you're listening to this podcast. I know you are. I would pay good money to have that exact physics engine in a crane game as a full game. I would pay good money for that. I know they released like the rabbit thing for the 3DS, and that's all good and fine, but it was 2D. I want this. It's so much fun. I like how they added it where there's actually a point to using the crane game because you can get all the items and put them in people's houses. I like that a lot. I like the fact that it tells you where she shells are.
I was like, it tells you where I am?
It shows you exactly where she
Quick,
says
go
is.
find him.
Link's Awakening wants to know your location.
I
Do not allow.
like that. there's so many things in this game that I like, and I feel like there are definitely quality of life improvements, and I will agree with you. I don't think it's enough to warrant like a $60 purchase. I think if you got this, if you could get this for $30, I say go for it, no doubt. Have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's worthy enough. For $50, I went for it. For $60, it's really pushing in the iffy category.
Right. And I mean, like, it's at the end of the day, anybody listening to this, it's your money. You do what you want to do with it.
If you think it's worth it, go for it. It's great.
Exactly. As a recommendation, this is what I basically will offer to you. It's exactly what Beta just said. Yeah. Although, even though you can just look it up on YouTube, although you shouldn't do that, but the ending theme almost makes the $60 price tag worth it. Because, again, they ditched the stupid toy box arrangements.
Does it really sound like a toy box that much to you? Because I didn't notice that at all.
I didn't pick up on that as much, but again,
like you play Yoshi's Island for the 3DS, that's a toy box arrangement.
Yeah.
Yeah, they basically, for so many themes, they just kind of got like a guy on a single flute, which is,
yeah.
It's
I
like,
heard that guy.
Okay. Oh, I know he had this cute story.
It was
and so, like,
story.
I'm not trying to harp on him. It definitely was like the vision of the director, because when you get to the end of the game, the credits theme goes all out with like a full orchestra and everything, and then they switch between like the original Game Boy and the toy box theme. Like they remind you, they're like, hey, this is what the game sounds like in our remake, but let's get right back into this awesome orchestrated soundtrack. And I'm like, oh man, if only the whole soundtrack was as grandiose as this was, because man, I've listened to it at least like 16 times now. 3 times by beating the game again, just like I'm just gonna beat it again so I can listen to the theme, and then the other like 13 times was on YouTube, because it's that good, and it reminds me that like this is what the whole soundtrack could have been, I don't know. Look it up, guys. If you haven't beaten the game yet and you don't care about audio spoilers,
Dude,
is that a thing?
You gotta look out.
I know.
Yeah,
for some people, there definitely will be.
My problem is walking
look
down
it
the
up.
street and someone's playing in their car. Dang.
It's over. You spoiled it for me. It's over.
And I can't beat the game.
really.
That's why I don't want to beat the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So should we do final thoughts?
I mean,
I have so much more to say.
Put it all in your
else?
final thoughts. Tell me. Go for it. It's your floor again.
No, actually, I was lying.
No, okay.
Actually, I was lying about this whole podcast. I really love the game.
It's my favorite game ever. Imagine.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Final thoughts then. Who wants to go first? I kind of know what she says is gonna say, because we've kind of really gone over it.
All right, hold on. Let's start off by trying to pretend that we know what each person's gonna say.
Oh, that's a fun game.
Speak on my behalf. Go ahead.
You want me to? Or Andy, you go first.
I dislike the game based purely on the fact that the original exists, and I wish they had have done something a bit different rather than doing the whole game exactly the same, but different, because the effects are different and the world is slightly better looking, but not that much. But not enough to. I parted ways with money, and I'm sad I got the serious case of buyer's remorse, because this game is not as good as the one that was in my head.
That's perfect, Andy, right there. This game isn't as good as the one in my head.
Yeah.
That is.
Right, so now I guess I do beta now.
Yeah, go for it.
This is the best game ever. I really loved it. There's no better game than this one, and I sound like Master Roshi from Dragon Ball.
It sounds more like something from Conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I can see that. Mr. Squirrel. Yeah, I get you what you're saying.
Yeah, you're so wrong. Try again.
This game can do no wrong.
My God.
Yeah. It doesn't get any better than this. There's no Zelda game that will ever surpass it.
Wow.
They should just stop here. Aonuma, you could just stop now.
The only way they could make this better is if it were real toys.
Wow,
What?
that
Lego
would be kind
set?
of interesting.
I would
Oh,
buy
maybe.
that. I mean, I already did. I bought an amiibo. That's
Nice.
a toy.
Yeah.
No,
Nice. All right, so I guess Beta does Andy now.
Yeah, I'll do yours, Andy.
Go.
Oh gosh, is it bad to do an accent?
Yes. If it's a bad
Okay.
if it's a bad version of it, then yes. But actually, now I want to hear it, so please do.
Okay.
Good luck.
I don't like this game, but I like it.
Dude, wrong part of the world, man. Wrong.
Okay. So,
I like this just as much as I
You-
like spam. I don't like spam.
This is what-
I've ever
okay,
had
here's what-
spam.
This is what Andy's thinking, everyone. Andy thinks
Go.
that this game looks good, plays good,
Yes.
is good, enjoyed it. But it's just okay. I'm wrong.
All right.
Here's my
Now
honest
let's do
opinion.
our real
Okay,
opinion.
so
Yeah, okay, we're
here's-
doing
Here we go.
honest.
Go for it.
Okay, I didn't dislike this game. I appreciate what it's trying to do. It is trying to take a new direction on an older game. I like what it does visually. I wish they would fix the slowdown. But graphically, I appreciate how it looks. The great thing about a remake is the fact that the original game still exists, and you can play either version, and you can appreciate either version for their different takes. That is the most on-the-fence thing I'll ever say. But
That's what I was expecting.
yeah, I don't dislike this game in any way. I appreciate what it's trying to do. I don't mind the music. I actually quite like it in some places. Yeah, it is the same game. It really depends
weird.
it boils down to like what your favorite aesthetic is. If you like
Yeah.
pixel art, play the original. If you like a fully kind of fleshed out, different interpretation of the original art style, whatever that may have been, we'll never know what the original intention was, but I think this is a pretty good approximation of it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree. Well, here's what I'm gonna
hate
say.
my-
Because I know she says it needs some time to cool down.
Yeah, man.
Okay, go for it, man.
So
Yeah.
After that comment.
I know. That was rough. That last sentence really hurt.
Wow.
All right, go for
Here's
it.
the real thing. Our opinions don't matter.
No.
That is
really.
the one thing. All that matters right now is what the viewer. What do you like? What is your aesthetic? Do you want a 90s anime Link aesthetic, like she says? Well, then, do you like a more toyish kind of aesthetic? What do you prefer? It's the same freaking game.
Basically.
It's just what skin do you want on the game? The
Yeah.
only things that are in addition are the claw machine. There's some little things.
Well, the
here
claw
and
machine
there.
was always there, but yeah.
Well, the addition of making it good and have a purpose.
Oh wow.
Jeez.
So
I swear, I think your closing statements are just all to aggravate.
A little bit, maybe.
My final opinion is I love this game. Might go back and play the Game Boy game because honestly, it's the same game. It's just whatever skin you like putting on it. Retro skin, new toy box kind of like skin, and maybe one day she says we'll get his 90s anime skin.
Maybe.
That's
Yeah,
that.
so it's like, all right,
my
my closing statements is it depends on what you prefer. Do you prefer a very serious looking art style?
You prefer right
that,
or
is-
wrong?
That's indicative of the time, or do you like Roblox? And
Oh wow. I don't know.
That's real rough there.
I had to work at something like that. No, okay. Now, serious moment now. It's funny because, again, to reiterate, I think that it's when you look at it on the surface, you stop. If you don't think about it very much at all, you think like this is a 1-for-1 remake, and then you get mad at the slight changes that were made. But then when you really stop and think about it, if you like really study at what's going on here, it's clearly like a artistic invention, and that invention is like if we took the game for what it was and then tried to make sense of the original art style, how would that look, and how would we translate that to make it work? And when you think about it like that, it's not a 1-for-1 remake. It's kind of like a weird challenge that the developers put on themselves. Like, for example, like you've seen those things online, and we're going to put it up on the screen, is like when a child makes a really crude drawing, and then a much more talented artist then interprets that janky art style into like a hyper realistic version.
Oh yeah, like my
that.
son drew this weird monster, and I'm a graphic designer, artist dude, and I've made it real now. Yeah, that's
what this game is. That's what this game is, and it's kind of cool in a way. I actually think that that's kind of neat. I really hope that people like Beta don't play this version alone and think that this is what the developers intended. That's the most insulting part.
Well, how do you know that?
Because like when you look at the art style, the line art that was used in the manuals, as well as the game's very own intros and endings, like it shows what the character was supposed to look like.
I guess
and
that's
also,
true.
and again, like there's so much that to the bosses themselves in the original game that shows that there was a much deeper level of detail that they wanted to express, but they couldn't because it was just limited to the Game Boy. Like if they wanted it to be a toy aesthetic, the bosses would have looked like toys in the original game, and they don't. They have like this distinct art style that kind of matches up somewhat with the intro and outro. It's just obviously it's still scaled down a bit because it's still in game, but you can see it and you can feel it and you can hear it. You can hear the attention with I'm reiterating, sorry. And but anyways, my point is that I think that this is a fine game. I at the end of the day kind of appreciated what it did, despite the fact of how I've expressed myself this entire podcast discussion. I think that it does some really neat things. There are a couple of things here and there where it's like, I really wish you hadn't changed that. But at the end of the day, it was to appeal to their vision for the most part. The only thing that I completely disagree with is how they translated the moblins in the forest. There's already pig characters in Link's Awakening, and they're in the original Game Boy game, and then they're also in this remake. But then for some reason, the developers thought like, oh, the moblins are supposed to look like Pig Wizard Ganon, when they're not. They're supposed to look like the bulldogs, and the moblins have been bulldogs in early stages of the Zelda games. So like Zelda 1, bulldogs. Link's Awakening, you can see features that are bulldogs. And then Ocarina of Time, once again, bulldogs. So for them to look at those sprites and say like, oh, these are also pigs, despite the fact that there's already a reference for what the pigs look like in Link's Awakening, was one of the weirdest decisions to me. I was like, oh, okay, you definitely misinterpreted that. Yeah. That aside, everything else I can see it as like all the diversions, all the differences are definitely to appeal to this challenge that the developers put on themselves. I know for a fact that this was all intentional. Like what's different is intentionally different. And I guess at the end of the day, I appreciate that challenge that they set on themselves and how it came out. It kind of came out kind of cool. And if you're a person who's played the original Link's Awakening and you love it as much as I do, try not to think about what it could have been. Try to just play this game and appreciate it for what it is. And when you do, you might enjoy it. Just remember that you can always go back and play the game that the original developers made if you want to go back and remind yourself what it could have been. But I digress. This game is still fine to play.
I wonder if the developers care as much about their game as you do. Like the original game. I honestly wonder.
No, I suppose not. Yeah. A lot of game developers see their games as just products. But also another thing too, I remember there was interviews with the original person who made Link's Awakening, and he was quoted as saying that he was so passionate that he was making this game in his off time. This was not a sanctioned project for a while, and he got a lot of the game made to a state that impressed the publishers at Nintendo. And it was because of that, because of his passion and his vision for what a great Zelda game would be, he managed to get the project greenlit, and that's how we got Link's Awakening to this day.
Huh.
So
next
when you think about that, yeah, you should do a Beta 64 in Link's Awakening. That'd be cool.
I should. And then say the remake's great.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's not terrible. I think
it's not.
What's funny?
Every point we've made is pure. It's purely an opinion.
Nitpicking.
It is a bit nitpicky.
Welcome 100%. to
100%.
Nitpick Podcast.
Yeah,
And like that's 100%. Like I don't I think that's where I feel conflicted. It's like I'm not out here trying to say it's a terrible game.
Yeah.
But like nitpicking is just something that's going to be part of the fun of talking about a game like this because there's reference material to look back on. And I think to ignore that would be robbing this conversation of any interest. But also, what was I going to say? Dang it. You reminded me of something and then I forgot.
No.
So,
Well, we're out of time.
oh, jeez.
Oh, frick. We've been talking about this for over an hour. I don't even think we really talked about the gameplay at all. We just talked about
No, because
the art style.
It's Zelda.
been-
You go around the map, you collect different items, you go to different dungeons, you collect keys. It's
I will say one thing before we go. I like the fact that it's also like a platforming game too.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I found that incredibly fun.
And here's another little bit of she says is a nitpicker. They should have had a button assigned to the feather because that thing was always in my active inventory, like the entire game. Like that should have had. There's so many buttons it could have been mapped to. I don't understand why that was one of the swappable items. You know,
It makes sense.
that was the thing.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, what you gonna do?
Well, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. I mean, I liked hearing your perspective on it, she says. I really did.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
I don't
Yeah, I like
necessarily
hearing yours,
agree
too.
with things, but it's like,
Yeah, of course.
this is what it means to be alive. You know, we get to enjoy other people's opinions, and whether you'll agree with it or not, that's okay. Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So leave a
all
comment down below. Who do you agree with? Team She Says, Team Beta, or Team Andy?
jeez. No, look, I will say this 100%. I realize that I shot myself in the foot in the eyes of so many people, and I apologize to any of those. I know that I am definitely an outlier situation, so please, if you enjoy the game and you have a wildly different opinion from me, I have no problem with you expressing that.
Yeah.
I absolutely, I'm just expressing a unique opinion, I suppose, and it should not be taken seriously, and you should not be influenced by my opinion anyway. I'm just a guy sharing what he thought about it.
He's just a
That's
random
all.
guy on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just like
exactly.
all of us.
Just full of
I'm
all
not
the
an
random
authority figure
guys.
by any means.
All the
Yeah.
random people on the internet. Yeah. It's fine. We can all have opinions. We're all grown up enough. You're wrong. No.
I don't know about that. I'm 13 years old.
I'm 34.
Okay, well,
That's
who's
it,
gonna end
guys.
the episode?
Yeah.
Who's gonna? Andy, you do it. I want you to bring it home.
I never know what to say. Well, thanks very much for listening or watching our podcast. If you want to,
Thank you for watching podcast.
thank you for watching it with your own eyeballs. If you want to see more of this or hear it in different places, we're on Spotify. Is that right?
Yeah, we're on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes. Isn't there one more? SoundCloud.
SoundCloud.
Oh, and for those of you with a Google Assistant, all you have to do is say, "Hey Google, play Game Club podcast."
It'll do it. Just
Whoa,
like magic.
I didn't know that. Also, thank you in advance to Mrs. 64 for editing this video
Yeah.
Thank
eventually.
you.
Yay! Thank you. Oh crap! My Google Home
So-
just is starting to play Game Club
So
podcast.
if you're watching this on YouTube and you enjoy the editing, you know who to thank.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly right.
don't thank me. I made this podcast worse this week.
No, you made it interesting, man.
Yeah,
you facilitated conversation.
Otherwise, it would have been 2 minutes of us going, yes, we really like this game. I like it
Yeah,
too.
I really
Me too.
liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what makes
bye,
Game
guys.
Club podcast so interesting. It's all the different opinions.
Exactly.
Now we're gonna talk about a vastly superior game next time. It's going to be Knights on the Nintendo.
Oh
Wii.
yeah, no, we need to do this because I will be
want
the
to
bad
do
guy
this.
on that
I
one.
can't wait.
I need to play it.
Bad guy Andy.
Yeah, it's.
I haven't played the Wii one, so once again I'll be the guy who
It's-
plays it for the first time.
Yeah.
No spoilers, but it's one of the best games of all time.
I don't think so.
I can't wait.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. The things are coming down.
Drop it on down.
And-
Good luck doing an edit for that.
all right. See everyone. Don't forget to do things. I don't remember how to end it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Don't
Oh,
hate me. Bye. Peach.
That was good. I felt so much passion in that episode.
I lied. I hate the game. It sucks. What?